Lewis Hamilton is the world champion-elect for the 7th time after a race for the history books where he clawed back a 24-second deficit to win in slippy conditions in Turkey. Welcome back to the Grid Talk podcast. Today we'll be reviewing the Turkish Grand Prix. Hosting today will be me, Ruby Price, and joining me are engineering student Owain Medford.
Hello.
CEO of the Chris Medland fan club, Sam Thatcher.
Oh, yeah.
And sports journalist Dev Tyagi.
Hey.
So, Owain, slippy conditions and Hamilton go hand in hand, but that wasn't always the case today, was it?
No, if you'd have just tuned in for the first half of the race, you'd have thought Lewis Hamilton's not very good in the wet. And then in the second half of the race, you kind of saw, obviously with a little bit of help from some slick tyres that they didn't put on. We saw why he won by almost a minute in 12 years ago. It's a classic Lewis Hamilton performance of, nursing the tyres around and sort of just beating everyone else.
And, rightly deserved today as well. 7th time world champion. Before moving on, Dev, 7 world titles isn't an easy feat. There's only one other driver in history that's got that, Michael Schumacher. This is, even though he was already going to be in the history books, this has cemented Lewis as one of the greatest of all time, hasn't it?
Undisputedly so. I mean, it's funny that just a few minutes back, I had bumped into this meme where the legendary Michael Schumacher is sitting with a smirk in his look, and then he says, "You're never going to be as good as me, Lewis." But guess what? He just equaled you. For sure, there are probably some German fans out there and thoughts with them. But this is just, it's just Hamilton at his best. He actually delivered the hammer time when none expected it. And to grab the race situation by the scruff of its neck when none expected it, I think that's the silver lining in the sky. And hardly a doubt that he says still I rise, because he arose actually from nowhere. And then this is an incredible performance. Gave us a race to remember.
Absolutely. And Sam, one last thing on Hamilton during the podcast, at least. It looked at one point as though, he was going to come in for a new fresh set of intermediates. But then he said, "Oh no, I remember what happened when I lost the world title because I pitted." I think we were all awaiting with bated breath for that.
Yeah, he must have had flashbacks to China 07 when he obviously famously lost the title in that pit lane. If it wasn't for that, we might be sitting there right now saying he was an 8-time world champion. I think definitely he's my opinion, he's the greatest of all time. He's done it across 13 seasons. He's won a race in every season he's been in. He's not been in the best car for all of his seasons. Everyone always says, he's just in the best car, but the best driver is getting the best car. Simple as that. And he is the best in the field right now. He lapped Bottas today. We'll get into it later. He had a hilarious race, but yeah, we lapped Bottas today, which was quite funny, to be honest. Lewis is my GOAT for sure. And there's been some rumours about him not staying on for next year, swirling around, but I don't really see that happening, because I think he's quite hungry to break the records, if he doesn't say it. But yeah, just an incredible performance from him today. Halfway through the race, it looked like he was nowhere, he was a full pit stop behind, when Stroll was still controlling the race. And he just seemed to come out of nowhere. He just on the back of Perez and Stroll, and as soon as he put past Perez, he didn't ever look back. And almost 40, 50 laps on those intermediate tyres. It was incredible. And what a man he is. Absolute legend.
Absolutely. And speaking of Perez, Sergio Perez, 31 seconds back on Lewis. Still second, just about. He nearly lost it in that last sector.
Yeah, it's kind of it's sort of the drive of someone who's definitely trying to keep their seat, and it's hard to look past that. Obviously, Sergio has shown that he's had massive amounts of skill time and time again, particularly when sort of conditions are slippery or he's nursing tyres or things like that. And he's under attack from probably a couple of faster cars behind him in the Ferraris, and it's a shame that he didn't do so well at McLaren when he was there, because he's shown that he's clearly a class driver and he knows exactly what he's doing. And it's just a shame that he might go out. I hope that this the performance that he's shown has sort of saved his seat. You can say that the racing point was good today. The conditions just really suited them. But Stroll got put on a new set of tyres and couldn't do anything with them and slipped backwards through the field. And Sergio did an amazing job.
Absolutely. And on to the driver who's taking that seat, Sebastian Vettel. Dev, being for Sebastian Vettel in 2020, what else is going to happen? Because, even a race ago, if you said that Sebastian Vettel would be A, the lead Ferrari, and B, finishing on the podium, I would have laughed.
Yeah, I mean, it's an insane finish to the Turkish Grand Prix, and I know of this particular huge fan of Vettel's, and she's actually Turkish, been interacting with this crazy fan on Twitter of late. And I said, my first thoughts go to you because you have been raving for him when probably a lot of his diehard fans would have given up, because it's been such a tumultuous year, hasn't it, for the great German driver. And then to take the podium finish milliseconds from the close of the race, I think that was sensational. But at the same time, it's incredible. So we saw two sides of Sepp. The heartening factor was the fact that he was the first to rush to congratulate Lewis Hamilton. I think it's the sign of a true sportsman. He did that in the past as well. But then this was Hamilton at his peak emotive best. And, what a great way to of two titans of the sport to embrace each other. And then the next part was when Mr. Brundle was interviewing the top three guys of the race. And then there was this bit of exchange with Perez. It was a lighthearted exchange. And then Perez was still trying to come to grips with the fact that he had actually overtaken to gather his third in the end. And then I'm sure Perez would have felt, oh my God, here's this guy who's actually, who's beaten me for the 2021 seat, and he would have just had the second two today. But yeah, just phenomenal stuff for Seb, and richly deserved. And one race where he finishes ahead of Leclerc, that shouldn't be forgotten.
And Sam, speaking of Leclerc, he was beating himself up on that in-lap at the end, but he did a fantastic job today. He started 16th. Well, he would have, based on, qualifying performances, I think it was. Maybe 14th.
Yeah, no, I believe he started 13th because of penalties.
Yeah. I don't think anyone knew the starting grid at this point.
But... No. But yeah, as you said, that was a pretty heartbreaking radio from him that we saw after the race. It's after his "I'm stupid" from Azerbaijan last year. He's got even harder himself on this radio. Which is it's quite harsh to himself because he drove a very good race today. There were times at the race where he was the fastest man on the track. We saw him come in first for the intermediates. Can't quite remember what lap it was, but he was one of the first to come in, and then we saw he was flying. Yeah, he came through the field well, closed all the gaps well, drove extremely well, but then just at the end it looked like he had got past Perez, which to the DRS, but then on the entrance to the last few corners, it looks like he got out of shape too much, let Perez back through, and that allowed Vettel to come through and take third. So yeah, he's probably kicking himself right now, but in terms of where he started, another great drive from him today. It just adds to the plethora of great drives he's had this year. He's easily been the best driver for Ferrari this year, one of the drivers of the season for me, because he's dragged that car so far higher than it should be, so many races this year. So yeah, another great drive from him, and he's probably going to be kicking himself now, but when he looks back on it, it's going to be a very good result for him and the team. And that brings Ferrari they're only 6 points behind Renault now, which is crazy to say. They actually have a shot at third in the constructors this year if things go their way in the last three races. So yeah, we'll see.
Absolutely. But on to fifth place, Owain, Carlos Sainz in the McLaren. We've said that the McLarens were basically nowhere this weekend, but towards the end, they were the cars to be in.
Yeah, they were really, really rapid, and they made some really, really good sort of overtakes, Carlos especially, and obviously it makes sense why Ferrari want him for next season, and Lando is if he was up in the driver market, it'd be hot property. They've had a sort of car change and sort of getting used to that, but that might have suited them actually this weekend. And like you say, the tyres just really switched on for them in the last stages of the race. They probably wanted it to last a little bit longer because Lando probably could have maybe done something with the Red Bulls if it had been a bit more fortunate for him. And Carlos was knocking on the door of Charles Leclerc right at the end. It looked like a run to the line. So yeah, it's an excellent result for them, keeping their title hopes alive for to maybe get third or fourth place.
Carlos Sainz could have quite easily had a second place if it had been another lap to go as well. But yeah. Dev, Max Verstappen spinning all over the place today. If we compare it to his 2016 masterclass in the rain in Brazil, Like, you'd think it was a different driver, but I think that just speaks volumes about the kind of surface that Turkey had this race weekend.
Absolutely. And, it's only fair to say that Max has himself to blame, because at the end of the day, I think the way he went into that self-consoling zone at the end of the qualifying on Saturday, where he was spotted around with one of the team engineers sitting in a corner and then inspiring memes all over social media. I think it was he himself who put that extra bit of pressure on himself. And I think that showed seconds from the start when the 5 red lights went green. Eventually, it was always going to be his track position to lose, and he had to concede. And because a track as slippery as this, offering hardly any grip for the drivers, it had to come down to your tire management, which is where you have to really take the risk between where you extract the most out of yourself and where you actually go into that self-preservation mode. And I don't think Max was up to the job, but man's got to do what he has to do. And despite Alex Albon's fantastic race, it's still Max is the number one guy, so he has to go for the kill. And had it been a dry track, he would have driven in the insanely quick fashion the way he did in Austria 2019. Remember when he was battling with Leclerc towards the very, very closing stages? Just that the surface didn't suit him. But guess what? That's Formula One. It's never going to ask you that should I offer you a dry track or a wet track. You have to be a master in both, and which is why it's hammer time, not Mad Max's bull run today.
Yeah, definitely. It sort of made me laugh when you were saying, oh, why hasn't DRS been activated yet? And then maybe a lap later spins. And I was like, that's why they haven't activated DRS yet. But onto his teammate, Alex Albon, it looked like an orchestrated move, Verstappen getting past him, Sam. But he still finished within 2 seconds of his teammate. And should Max Verstappen, who is under investigation for potentially crossing the pit exit line, that could see Alex Albon up ahead of Max Verstappen.
Yeah, quick Verstappen. Yeah, that was a stupid move on Perez as well. Like, so impatient. Just left him outside on the turn there, like spinning around. Puts him back behind like Lewis to make him do another pit stop that he didn't really need to do. Like, such a stupid move. Anyway, yeah. And just getting onto Albon. Yeah, Albon was quite unlucky in the first phase of pit stops because he was left out way too long on the full wets compared to everybody else. He was the last person to come in to put the inters on the first phase of the race, put him in quite a disadvantageous position. But then we saw him come back at everybody else. Obviously got past Max because of that spin. But then Albon very quickly caught up to the likes of Hamilton and Vettel, and a very opportunistic move to get past Hamilton when he tried to go down the inside of Vettel, but then he went wide into the last 2 corners and then took Vettel down the inside of the last corner onto the straight. And then he very quickly opened up a gap on those two. And it looked like at one point he may actually be in the shower winning the race when he was catching up to Perez and Stroll extremely quickly. But then in the next phase of the race, he lost like all his grip on his tyres. Like, you could just see on the rear, his rear right tyre was just absolutely shot with no grip. And we saw him spin round. And then that was the kind of time where Lewis started to come into the picture of the race to win. And then Albon after that seemed to kind of vanish from the race. We didn't really see much of him after that. As you say, at the end, it looks like some sort of orchestrated move to let Verstappen pass Albon, which is, I don't really think it's fair, because I think Albon are a very good race today, had a good weekend, really acquitted himself well. But still, I still kind of think he's going to be out of a seat at Red Bull next year, to be honest. I don't think he's done. He had a very good weekend today, and it could have been a lot better. To be honest, had he not made that mistake when he was closing in on Stroll, he could have well won the race today. But I think Lewis would have had it, but he could have had a podium today easily. So I think he'll be kicking himself because of that. But yeah, in terms of Albon's seat for next year, I'm fairly sure that he's not going to be at Red Bull unless he does like a madness in the last 3 races. And it's going to be interesting to see who gets that seat. I think because of how well Perez drove today, if he's not on the grid next year, it will be absolute crime, in my opinion. But yeah, Albon today, yeah, pretty good, but could have been better.
Could I just add one more point to what Sam's saying? So in a way, arguably speaking, one of the hot contenders for one of the most underappreciated moments from the Turkish Grand Prix was Albon's drive, because in lap 21, he was actually 9 seconds off the lead in third. What happens 8 laps later? He brings down the gap to the front runners by he was only 1.2 seconds off Perez when he was in third. So, for 8 grand laps, he was the one who was controlling the race pace. And that was insane.
On the timeline, I was saying, Albon, this is this is your moment. This is your moment now to like seal your fate for next year. But then, yeah, as you say, after that, he kind of just got stuck behind Perez, and then there was that little middle part of the race where everything changed and went into Lewis's favour. So yeah, as you say, he had this like 50 minutes of fame when he was like couldn't have won the race, which was crazy. But yeah, as you say, he was a very underappreciated drive today.
The wonders of being in clear track.
Yeah.
But Owain, let's talk about Lando Norris. You've already mentioned, he'd be hot property for the drivers' market if he was available, but still finishing in 8th after being in the McLaren for the first half of this race. That's an impressive feat. Yeah,
especially I don't remember where he qualified, unfortunately, but it was it was really good. I mean, it was kind of a sort of, you didn't really see much of him, but what you did see, you saw him get a couple of overtakes, but they didn't really show him much because obviously everything else was happening around, which means unfortunately quite a good drive. He's gone a little bit sort of unnoticed, I think. But yeah, he's done a really good job to get up into 8th, and like I say, that's still points. It's still obviously a good amount of points to keep you taking home. And did he get a fastest lap point as well?
Yeah, he got the fastest lap.
Yeah. Which I think says enough about the speed that they had in at the end of the race. The McLaren was clearly working there, and he was sort of. Well, I mean, he was kind of almost in a world of his own by the end. Obviously, Lance Stroll was having issues, but he had such a gap either side of him that it was kind of anonymous almost for him.
Absolutely, the car behind him being Daniel Ricciardo, who was showing as to why it wasn't slick tyres just quite yet, Dev. He hit his teammate at the start down to a racing incident, but it was always going to be a, close shave at the start, wasn't it?
On Stroll?
Oh yeah, it
you
was.
You missed out Stroll, actually.
I've missed out Stroll. Let's ignore Stroll.
That's how visibly was after that last pit.
That's basically what happened to Stroll after he pitted the second time. He just disappeared, and he's disappeared from my timing sheets.
Yeah. Ruby's clued into how Stroll wants to remember this race.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But yeah, go on, talk about Stroll.
I think the first half of the race belonged to him. The latter belonged to the 7-time world champion. I think it could just be one of those races which could be down to a lack of race experience and probably driving in these conditions, because there's really no other way you can put the P9 down to any other thing, because it was always going to be his race to lose, and it's quite dreadful. He must be kicking himself in the gut, but. I mean, I couldn't believe it myself, because, I think at the end of 29 laps with just exactly the same number to go, I thought this is like an iconic 1-2 Racing Point finish. And but still, he must take heart from the fact that he's the 5th youngest pole setter in Formula One's checkered history. And yeah, I hope with age being on his side and a team which he certainly can bank on with closed eyes, so many race wins lay ahead of him. And I think his best days are obviously in front of him. So just one of those days.
Yeah. To actually make a point on Lance Stroll, obviously, like, as you were saying, it looked like it could have been one of those weekends for him where, just everything fell into place. But, apparently the second stop just wasn't the right decision for him.
Yeah. He was so like calm during the first stint, like when everything was going his way. Then as soon as the track kind of started to dry up, we saw him on the radio. He was getting like agitated, wasn't he?
He was getting understeer and was like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And once you start doubting yourself, that's when things tend to go wrong, unless you're Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, exactly. And that just comes down to a lack of experience leading races and controlling races that we know Lewis has, which Lance doesn't have in one. So, but I think he gets like harshly treated by a lot of people because of his money and everything, and his dad. But yeah, it was a very poor second half of the race from him, and yeah, he'll probably be feeling pretty sad tonight, but overall a good weekend.
And just to mention as well, like on the whole lack of experience leading races, it was so obvious from the pre-race lap that he's never been in that position before, because when have we ever seen such a big gap at the end of the formation lap? It's crazy. But moving on to Daniel Ricciardo, finally, as I said, he hit his teammate at the start, but managed to recover from that himself. But it wasn't the time for slicks, despite the kind of moves that he would have been wanting to make, wasn't it, Sam?
Yeah, that incident at the start was definitely a racing incident, because we saw, I think it was Lewis going down his inside and Ocon around his outside. Like there was no way he could have gone, and obviously that sent Ocon round. which that in turn sent Bottas around as well. So it's kind of like a chain reaction. So yeah, that was definitely racing instant. And then the rest of the race, we didn't really see a lot of Ricciardo, to be honest. It wasn't one of his like days where he's sending it down the inside of everybody, and it wasn't one of those days today. And yeah, as you say, yeah, definitely not time for the slicks at all, because there was still so much like standing water on the curbs and everything would have sent you round in an instant. So yeah, the slicks were just not viable today. But yeah, Ricciardo, yeah, like 1 point, probably the best could hope for, really. Like, not a good day for Renault in terms of constructors' trial, because this has lost them a lot of ground in the battle for third. Because obviously Ocon had a poor day as well. So yeah, I think as I said, they're only 6 points ahead of Ferrari now, and obviously with Perez's second place, Stroll's ninth, they've lost a lot of ground to Racing Point, and obviously McLaren as well. So not a good day for Renault today after like a string of really good races, obviously with Ricciardo's podium in the last race as well. So yeah, a really day to forget for Ricciardo, really.
Sort of back to reality, you could probably call it.
Classic Renault.
Classic Renault. But yeah, his teammate Owain, 11th, first of the lapped runners. It was pretty much all over for Ocon from the start, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Obviously, yeah, he had that incident where he got spun round, obviously, and then, he had sort of further incidents throughout the race. I actually think he's done quite well to get 11th, actually, because it looked like he was going to sort of finish sort of below 15th. But I guess there's enough speed in the Renault and, of decent strategy calls when to go on top on the intermediates and change over again to a new set of intermediates, get some warm tyres on. Has made it so that he can get to 11th and finish just behind his teammate, which obviously he's quite far. He was probably 30 seconds behind, I guess, just based on the lap times. But that was just that's the sort of thing you need to be able to do. That's a great recovery drive from a lap, obviously a really bad start. And it's decent for him. Obviously, he's not going to get any points for it, but to see him be able to do that is good for him.
Definitely. Dev, Danny Kvyat, 12th, but the lead AlphaTauri are a team that, take what they can get when the opportunity arises, but the opportunity just wasn't there for them this weekend, was it?
It's really funny that there was so much happening further up in the grid that you almost forgot that there was Daniel Kvyat running in the race. At least I did. I mean, this is somebody who delivered his best performance just a few days ago when he finished with the fighting fourth at Imola. And I think that warranted a lot of appreciation. I was personally hoping, as a fan of the underdog racers in Formula One, that he would have carried on to something brilliant. But again, not really sure if he's the guy who can handle himself well and extract the best out of the car on a tricky track under wet like this. And that's what it turned out to be. I think still something good for his morale is that he managed to finish one place ahead of Monza's hero, the sentimental favorite, and the underdog once again, Pierre Gasly. But that's pretty much it. As a team, 12th and 13th, not much to say there.
Yeah, but on that point, Sam, like Pierre Gasly, his teammate, his race was off to an interesting start when, the team decided to take his car out of Parc Fermé and not do anything.
Yeah, that was quite odd to read, because it looked like they were thinking about giving him a new engine, a new, maybe an internal combustion engine, I'm not sure. And then they decided, oh no, we're not going to do that anymore. So they just reverted back to the engine that they eventually used, which you can't do because Parc Fermé, you can't adjust anything. So I'm kind of wondering what was going through their heads when they decided to do that, because they probably ruined his race, to be honest. So obviously he started
he was back of the grid.
Yeah, 18th in the end, because obviously the two Williams started in the pit lane. So he started at the back of the grid, and we saw him get off to a good start, making up 6 places during the first lap. But yeah, after that we didn't really. It's one of those races where you don't. To be honest, the whole bottom top 10 we didn't really see like a great deal of them today. It was definitely a race for the top 10 today. Yeah, Gasly, not after such an amazing season for him. It's not one that will live long in the memory for him or the whole team.
Definitely. Owain, I mentioned that Verstappen was doing his best Beyblade impersonation during the race, but Valtteri Bottas was probably doing a better impersonation, because from what I can gather, he spun 4 times today.
Yeah,
this was not a race for Valtteri Bottas.
No, it's strange also to see, obviously his teammates gone and won the race, and and done it in fairly commanding fashion. And well, I think Valtteri was doing his best sort of Massa from 2008 impression, where he's just obviously really, really difficult conditions and all that, but just couldn't keep it in a straight line for any big period of time. It probably didn't help that, every time he spud, he lost tire temperature, and then he's obviously fighting with one hand behind his back on that one. But it was really a day to forget. He looked dejected in yesterday's interviews. It's almost like he knew it was going to happen or something like that. It was obviously tripped up at the start, and that obviously doesn't do your chances any good. But something as fast as a Mercedes should be able to get through the field, and he just really couldn't because he just kept spinning.
Definitely. Like, I'd say the only actual fun he had was keeping Lewis Hamilton behind for an entire lap when he was under blue flags.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny, to be honest. Like, which wasn't getting out of the way. Like, in the first corner, Lewis had to go like around the outside, didn't he? Just completely onto the wet. I thought it was hilarious, to be honest. Yeah, dreadful day for him. Absolutely dreadful. And he's gone out of the championship with a whimper, hasn't he? Once again, he started off well, but has faded over the course of the season because he just is nowhere near Lewis.
Dev, let's talk about your favourite driver, Kimi Räikkönen. A quiet race in 15th, but, he finished the race, which is better than his teammate.
Yeah, I mean, if Kimi would be here, he would simply say, wow, it was a shit race. I mean, I lost chance to finish in points. But, I mean, P8 was certainly a good start on the grid. But, I mean, here we are criticizing other drivers spinning off. This is the sport's most experienced driver, but then, happens to everyone. But certainly a chance lost. And I think he was managing his race pace fairly well in the first half of the race until lap 27, which is where he was on 9th, and he was, battling, hanging on for his dear life to at least gather 1 or 2 points, but it wasn't there to be. And I think once again, the only lowly positive, for the lack of a better word, is the fact that he finishes ahead of Antonio Giovinazzi. But then that's what he's done for the better part of the season so far. So, I mean, doesn't really change much about Räikkönen, but that's all that there is to it. Just the fact that he's finished ahead of the younger drivers, but probably luck assisted here.
But the only driver he did actually finish ahead of was George Russell, who started on the intermediates, which was, clearly not the right decision. Switched over late, and started from the pit lane as well. It wasn't a race for George Russell today, was it, Sam?
No. Fortunately not. Like, at the start, you kind of think, oh, these inters, they could be maybe a shot in the arm, because obviously they're starting from the pit lane and missed out on all the first corner chaos, which we saw. But yeah, it's just at the start, the inters were just not the right tyres to be on for at least the first 10, 11, 12 laps. Well, 10, 15 laps, really. So they just lost so much time. George and Nicholas just lost so much time in that first stint, which they couldn't. Of course, we saw him. He was probably running up as high as 11th, doing middles before he came into his first stop. But yeah, after that, just no pace. Just nowhere near the points today. Yeah, so it's the weight goes on for George and his first points, and it's getting to the point where he may be the one with a record, like, for the most races started without points. Who holds it?
Isn't it Luca Badoa?
Yeah, he holds it. Yeah, Badoa. I'm not too sure how many races it is. But I think it's around 50 races. Obviously, George will probably come up to be equal in that next year.
About 37 by the end of the season, I think. It will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, the weight goes on for him. Yeah, he was nowhere near the points today.
He was in 11th for a bit, but as I said, he needed to pit at that point.
Yeah, he was out of sync with everybody else. Like, he'd gone for so long on those tyres. And once he came into the pits, he was nowhere near. We didn't really see a lot of him today.
And let's just cover the DNFs as well. Owain, Kevin Magnussen, Roman Grosjean. Magnussen had, that shoddy pit stop where things just clearly weren't on properly, sent him back out again. And then he just stopped again a couple of laps later. Roman Grosjean just DNF'd. I don't know what happened to Roman Grosjean. It's been one of those races.
That's what happens to crash zones.
Yeah. Magnussen was doing all right, I think. I think I saw him as high as 11th, and he was holding up quite a lot of people, which was strange for the Haas. And then obviously, I think it might have been an unsafe pit stop, didn't get everything put on properly. And then I don't remember what happened to Grosjean, I think, which says a lot. He didn't crash. He didn't crash. We know that because there was no safety car or anything like that. I think maybe it's just a retirement that they didn't show.
I'm pretty sure Grosjean spun around like a couple of times he kept going again, but I guess they just fought for a time because there's no point in finishing. I don't know.
Maybe they flat spotted all his tyres or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Just thought there's no point breaking suspension over it.
And I think because those two obviously out of the team for next year is kind of getting to that point where we've got 3 races left. None of us are all that bothered about this year. They've got a terrible car. They're nowhere near the points. So yeah.
To still think of the fact that this is a guy who has no fewer than 10 podiums against his name.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was driving pretty well during those Lotus Renault years, and he was consistently performing, in tracks like Hungary, Spain, the other venue.
Nürburgring, he was on the podium.
Yeah, you're right, and that's where he is. But personally, I would be more sad for K-Mag. Finds himself no seat. I don't know what happens now. He's still very young. He's still young, if not very, very young.
Now, Nicholas Latifi, Dev, just didn't get out of didn't get out of the garage at the start, so then started, from the pit lane. What was going on there? Because there was no reason as to why they shouldn't have made it to the, track.
Right. I think at the beginning they wanted to avoid any opening lap dramas or theatrics, but that explains where they started from. But in the end, it was another forgettable race for him. And it's not that he hasn't really looked good. Truth be told, in races like Monza and Mugello, he was looking in firm control of the proceedings, which is when poor things happened to him. But clearly not up to the mark as his teammate, the most promising driver of the younger lot so far. But I think I just hope that guys like Latifi and Russell, I beg your pardon, get the car which is much closer to their expectations, because they have a lot of time and skill on their hands, and the last thing you want is for raw talent to be aligned with a machine which is as poor as that. But just another forgettable race. Nothing new to be added there.
And the last of the cars, number 99 himself, Antonio Giovinazzi. Sam, he's used to getting some overtakes on the start this season, but I don't think he actually managed any other than, cars going backwards. But he was still in 11th by the end of the first lap. So he has to have gone backwards.
So obviously on the way to the grids for like the warm-up lap, or before he got into the grids, obviously we saw him bin it into the wall, lost his front wing, but then it looked like he might not be able to start the race. Obviously, the Alfa Romeo mechanics got that turned around for him. He was able to start, but then, another decent start for him. He's always good at the starts. This year, we're making up places, but then it just looked like some sort of mechanical issue. I'm not too sure what it is. Send him out of the race, and quite unlucky to be honest, because performed well in qualifying yesterday, got into Q3 for the first time in his career. So I think he's improving as a driver, and I'm pretty happy for him that he's got another year at Alfa to kind of show what he can do, and hopefully in a kind of a more competitive car next year, because obviously this year they've been firmly at the back, haven't they, for most of the year. They haven't really made any progress, and it's a shame, because obviously this race was Sauber's 500th Grand Prix, which is a great achievement. I think only 3 other teams have managed more than them. Gio, pretty forgettable day for him.
So let's move on to driver of the day. I don't want to say Hamilton, but I imagine many of us might be thinking it. So, Owain, go on.
I'm going to go with Sebastian Vettel, because he finished 3rd. And that's pretty good for them.
For Vettel in that car, yeah.
Yeah, the one day where he could spin and it wouldn't be like, no one would give him any stick for it, and he doesn't.
Dev?
I would actually have to go for Alex Albon, truth be told. I know it's an unusual choice, but he's someone who's earned a lot of flack, and for which he's himself been responsible. He's first 10 races of the season. He gets into the top 10, then he just slides back further to the end of the grid. Then what he does is that he spends the rest of the time just climbing back to 10 to 12, 10 to 13. But today he was actually, I noted it down, he was actually onto 3rd by lap 17. And as I said earlier in this conversation, from lap 21 to 29, he was really controlling the race proceedings by holding on to his grid position, which was P3 at that point in time. And I think not a pathetic race by any stretch of imagination for a driver who's really under pressure, because he knows he's dealing with some people who would just want to craft the way forward of the team around one man, which is Max Verstappen, not him. So I think by his standards, and he's been fairly inconsistent as well. This was a good race. It was a test of character. He was eventually overtaken by a few drivers in the end, but I think it's a very decent and underappreciated finish inside top 10. So Albon for me.
Sam?
It's a difficult one. I think it's like between like any of the top four could be. I'm going to say I don't want to go with this. I'm going to go with Lewis. I think that's a really boring choice, I know, but like today, yeah, obviously he started 6th, and like at one point in the race he was a pit stop down on Stroll at the time, who was leading the race. He thought, oh yeah, there's no way he's going to get back into this, even though we know what he can do. But then he just kind of, he saw him stuck behind Seb, and he took the choice to drop kind of a few seconds behind Seb, recollect his thoughts, and then just after that he just looked unbeatable. Once he got past Checo, he just like opened up a monumental gap to the rest of the fields. Got himself a pit stop free, and then in the end didn't even need extra tyres. Like went over 40 laps on those Inters to the point where they looked like slicks towards the end of the race. And to keep it in a straight line, composure, all the whilst knowing when the 7th world tyre is crazy. And I think today's solidified his claim to be the GOAT, really. So, our driver of the day.
I'm also going to give it to Lewis. Like, it was a race of, you've got to be there to actually take it. And Lewis Hamilton made sure that he was still there when the opportunity came up, by going long, not pitting when everyone else was. It's pretty obvious why the two cars that finished 1 and 2 only did one stop, because they won in the end. And Lewis Hamilton, as you said, certified himself as the greatest of all time, a joint greatest of all time today.
Yeah, you could have like a massively long debate about which driver is better. It's kind of down to personal preference.
Yeah, at this point it is personal preference, because they've both topped the records. They've both performed in, very challenging circumstances and very easy circumstances as well, based on, different levels of dominance. But hey ho.
Yeah, and in terms of Lewis, like I think Lewis is due a knighthood in this country now. Like honestly, but what more does he have to do to get a knighthood? Honestly, he's like
pay some tax.
Yeah,
cough.
But he pays a lot of tax though. Like,
I know.
And then that's what like boomers say, isn't it? That's what like to say, oh, he's a tax dodger, not sport, or he's in the best car. And whenever I see that, I kind of just despair, because these people just don't really know what they're talking about. And I think if he doesn't get a knighthood in this country in the next couple of years, it will be a travesty, to be honest. Like, he's got to be a Sir or MBE or CBE, whatever. Any one of those, he deserves one of them.
Why not crown him king?
No, could do.
I think there are a lot of cricketers who've done far less for England, but who've got knighted. But here's this man who's done pretty much everything.
There are footballers in the current England team who have done less for England that have got MBEs.
Yeah. I mean, Marcus Rashford obviously is
Marcus Rashford is very much deserving of what.
Yeah, he's a deserving personality. Yeah, as you said, Dev. I don't know who the cricketers are that have got Alistair Cook. Is he a Sir?
Alistair Cook. He's now Sir Alistair Cook.
Yeah, and he's obviously done amazing things for England at the Ashes. So I think Lewis Hamilton doing this in Formula One is equal as achievement as that. So yeah, he deserves one. So hopefully he gets one. But whether we win or not in this country is another question.
It's a debate to be continued in the Facebook post show.
Yeah, we'll save that a bit more. It's a bit more controversial, isn't it, that debate?
Yeah. So on that note,
I'll just say this: his connect with people. Alistair Cook connects with just the English people. Lewis Hamilton connects universally with people. There are Brazilians who love him. There are Indians I know who love him. There are Australians who love him. There are so many people who love him. Alistair Cook, legend that he is. So the final ruling is that he really deserves his title. I mean, it's about time.
Yeah.
So if you are watching the Facebook live stream, stick around because we're going to be talking for, a bit longer. There's a lot more things that happen that we can still be discussing. But if you're not, like the Facebook Chronicle page, like the F1 Chronicle page on Facebook to watch the shows as we record them and, get involved. We're available on Amazon Music, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. We have a huge back catalogue of shows. This is episode 75 now. Got previews, reactions to qualifying and the race results as well. We're on Reddit. Just search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk. And we also have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. We're back next week to preview the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. Thank you very much to the panelists for joining me.
No worries.
No problem.
And goodbye.